Have you ever watched someone arrogant think they've already won, only to lose everything in a single second? Imagine a courtroom. A wealthy, sneering husband is laughing because his wife, the woman he spent 10 years isolating and breaking down, is standing there all alone, with no lawyer to defend her. He thinks it's over. He thinks he's walking away with the millions, the house, and the custody. But he forgot who raised her. When those courtroom doors swung open, the silence was deafening, and the look on his face, priceless. You are not going to believe who walked in. The air in courtroom 4B of the Cook County Circuit Court was stale, smelling faintly of floor wax and anxious sweat. It was the kind of room designed to make you feel small. High ceilings, dark mahogany paneling, and the relentless hum of fluorescent lights that buzzed like a trapped fly. Bella Jensen stood behind the defendant's table, her hands gripping the edge of the wood so tightly her knuckles had turned the color of old parchment. She wore a simple grey suit she'd bought at a thrift store 3 days ago. It was slightly too large in the shoulders, making her look even more fragile than she felt. At 34, Bella looked tired. Not just sleepy tired, but soul tired, the kind of exhaustion that comes from a decade of walking on eggshells. Across the aisle, occupying the plaintiff's table like a king on a throne, sat Richard "Rick" Jensen. Rick looked magnificent, in the way a predator looks magnificent before it strikes. He was wearing a bespoke navy Brioni suit that probably cost more than Bella's car. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed, his tan was fresh from a business trip to St. Bart's, and he was currently leaning over to whisper something to his attorney, a smirk playing on his lips. His attorney was distinct trouble. Arthur Sterling was legendary in Chicago. They called him the Butcher of State Street. He didn't just win divorce cases, he incinerated the opposition. He was the kind of lawyer you hired when you wanted to salt the earth so nothing would ever grow there again. All rise, the bailiff droned, his voice bored. Judge Harrison Miller swept in. He was a man known for his impatience and his distaste for courtroom theatrics. He adjusted his glasses, looked at the docket, and then peered down at the parties involved. Case number 24D1092, Jensen versus Jensen, the judge announced. We are here for the preliminary hearing regarding asset division and custody of the minor child, Leo Jensen. Judge Miller looked at Rick's table. Mr. Sterling, you are representing the plaintiff? I am, Your Honor, Sterling said, his voice smooth as aged scotch. He stood up, buttoning his jacket with a practiced flourish. We are ready to proceed. In fact, we are anxious to conclude this matter quickly for the sake of the child. And for the defense? The judge's eyes slid to Bella. Silence stretched across the room. It felt heavy, suffocating. Bella stood alone. There was no briefcase-toting associate beside her, no stack of files, no legal pad filled with notes, just Bella and a small, battered purse. Mrs. Jensen, the judge prompted, his brow furrowing. Where is your counsel? Bella cleared her throat. It felt like swallowing broken glass. I don't have one here yet, Your Honor. A snort of laughter erupted from the plaintiff's table. Rick didn't even try to hide it. He covered his mouth with his hand, but his shoulders were shaking. Sterling smirked, shaking his head with exaggerated pity. Order, Judge Miller snapped. Though he didn't look angry at Rick, he looked annoyed at Bella. Mrs. Jensen, you were served papers 3 months ago. You have had ample time to retain counsel. This is a high-asset divorce case involving custody. Proceeding pro se is ill-advised. I know, Your Honor, Bella said, her voice trembling slightly. I intended to hire someone, but my accounts were frozen. Rick leaned forward, speaking loud enough for the microphone to pick up, though he pretended it was an aside. "She spent it all, Your Honor. Gambling debts, shopping. We had to freeze the joint accounts to stop the bleeding." "That is a lie," Bella cried out, the injustice sparking a sudden flare of heat in her chest. "He cut me off the day he filed. I haven't been able to buy groceries, let alone hire a lawyer like Mr. Sterling." "Your Honor," Sterling interjected smoothly, "my client merely secured the marital assets to prevent dissipation. Mrs. Jensen has a history of, let's call it, financial instability. We have the credit card statements to prove it. It was a fabrication, a meticulously crafted lie. Bella had been an architect before Rick convinced her to quit, to focus on the home, to let him handle the finances. For 10 years, she had been given a cash allowance like a child. She had no credit history of her own anymore. She was a ghost in the financial system. "Mrs. Jensen," the judge said, taking off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose, "I cannot make the court wait because you failed to prepare. If you do not have an attorney present, you will represent yourself today. Do you understand what that means? You will be held to the same standards of evidence and procedure as Mr. Sterling here." It was a death sentence. Everyone in the room knew it. Bella Jensen against Arthur Sterling was like a kitten fighting a wood chipper. "Rick," Bella whispered, looking across the aisle, "please, for Leo, don't do this." Rick turned to her. His eyes, usually blue, looked grey and hard like slate. He didn't whisper. He spoke clearly, his voice dripping with condescension. "You wanted out, Bella? You said you couldn't breathe. Well, now you're out. Sink or swim, babe." "But looking at you?" He looked her up and down, sneering at her cheap suit. "You're already drowning. You should have just signed the settlement I offered. You'd have a nice little condo in the suburbs and 10 grand in the bank. Now, you're going to get nothing. Mr. Jensen, address the bench, not the defendant," the judge warned, but he didn't sound convincing. He looked at the clock. "Mrs. Jensen, are we proceeding, or are you forfeiting your opening statement?" Bella's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked at the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom. They remained shut. She promised, Bella thought desperately. She said she would handle it, but it had been years. Maybe the letter never arrived. Maybe she didn't care anymore. Why would she? Bella had pushed her away when she married Rick. She had chosen the charming, ambitious developer over her own blood. "Mrs. Jensen." The judge's voice was sharp now. Bella stammered. "I just need 5 minutes, Your Honor. Please." "No," Sterling boomed. "Your Honor, this is a stalling tactic. She has no one. She has no funds, no family support. Her parents are estranged, as per her own admission during deposition. She is wasting the court's time because she knows she has no defense against her adultery and negligence. Adultery, another lie. Negligence, the biggest lie of all. Bella lived for her son. "That's enough," Judge Miller said. "Mrs. Jensen, we are starting. Mr. Sterling, call your first witness." Rick leaned back in his chair, crossing his legs. He shot Bella a look of pure triumph. It was the look he gave when he closed a deal, when he crushed a competitor, when he bought a property for pennies on the dollar. It said, "I own this room. I own the truth. I own you." "Actually," Bella said, her voice surprisingly loud, I object." "You object to what?" the judge asked, baffled. "We haven't started yet." "I object to the idea that I am alone," Bella said, her eyes fixed on the doors. "Mrs. Jensen, unless you have invisible friends, the court record shows you are pro se," the judge sighed. "Last warning." Arthur Sterling stood up, buttoning his jacket again. Your Honor, I move for a default judgment on the custody arrangement. Clearly, the defendant is mentally unstable. Granted, the judge began to say. If there is no counsel, boom. The sound wasn't a gavel. It was the double doors at the back of the courtroom, hitting the walls with a force that shook the room. The heavy oak slabs flew open as if kicked by a SWAT team. The sudden noise made the stenographer jump and Rick spin around in his chair. Even Judge Miller froze, his mouth half open. Silhouetted in the doorway stood a figure. It wasn't a man. It was a woman. She was older, perhaps in her late 60s, but she stood with a posture that made her look 7 feet tall. She wore a suit that was not grey, not black, but a piercing, unapologetic crimson red. She held a black leather briefcase in one hand and a gold-tipped cane in the other, though she didn't seem to need it for walking. She used it for punctuating the air. Behind her trailed 3 younger lawyers, 2 men and a woman, scrambling to keep up, carrying boxes of files like frantic acolytes chasing a deity. The woman in red stepped into the courtroom. The click of her heels on the linoleum floor was rhythmic, sharp, and terrifyingly confident. Click, click, click. She walked right past the gallery, ignoring the gasps of the few spectators. She walked past the bar. She didn't stop until she was standing directly next to Bella. She didn't look at Bella. She looked straight at Judge Miller. "My apologies for the theatrics, Your Honor," the woman said. Her voice was deep, smoky, and carried a British accent that sounded like it had been sharpened on a whetstone. Traffic on the I-90 is absolute murder this morning. Judge Miller blinked. He looked at the woman, then at the 3 associates, setting up a wall of files on Bella's previously empty table. "And you are?" Judge Miller asked, his voice losing some of its authority. The woman slowly turned her head. She looked at Arthur Sterling. Sterling, the butcher of State Street, had gone pale. His mouth was slightly agape. He looked like he had seen a ghost. "Arthur," the woman said, nodding to him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You've put on weight." Then she turned back to the judge. "I am Evelyn Vance," she announced, "senior partner at Vance, Thorne and Holloway out of New York City, and I am representing the defendant, Bella Jensen." The silence that followed was absolute. Rick leaned toward his lawyer. "Who the hell is Evelyn Vance?" he hissed. "And why do you look like you're going to throw up?" Sterling swallowed hard, loosening his tie. "She's not just a lawyer, Rick. She's the one who taught me. 20 years ago." Rick scoffed. "So? She's an old lady. We'll crush her." Bella looked at the woman beside her. She hadn't seen her mother in 6 years. Not since the wedding. Not since Evelyn had told her, "He will break you, Bella. And I won't watch it happen." Evelyn finally turned to look at her daughter. Her eyes, usually so critical, softened for a fraction of a second. She reached out and squeezed Bella's hand. "Stand up straight, darling," Evelyn whispered. "The cavalry has arrived." Evelyn turned back to the judge, her face hardening into a mask of war. "Now," Evelyn said, slamming her briefcase onto the table. "I believe Mr. Sterling was just moving for a default judgment based on my client's lack of resources. I would like to contest that. And while we're at it, I'd like to discuss the $7 million Mr. Jensen has hidden in the Cayman Islands." Rick's face went white. The drama had just begun. The silence in the courtroom following Evelyn's declaration was the kind usually reserved for bomb disposal units. Rick Jensen's face had gone from a flush of victory to a ghostly, chalky white. He looked at Arthur Sterling, his eyes wide and pleading. "Do something!" his expression screamed. Sterling, shaking off his initial shock, straightened his tie. He was a shark, and sharks didn't stop swimming just because a bigger boat appeared. "Your Honor," Sterling said, his voice regaining its oily confidence. "This is preposterous. Ms. Croft hasn't filed an appearance. She hasn't submitted a motion. She cannot simply barge in here like it's a theatre production and start throwing around wild accusations about imaginary money in the Cayman Islands." "Imaginary?" Evelyn laughed. It was a dark, rich sound that echoed off the mahogany walls. "Arthur, you always did have trouble distinguishing between reality and what your clients pay you to believe." She turned to her team of associates. "Thomas, the red file, please." One of the young lawyers, a sharp-jawed man named Thomas, handed her a thick binder bound in red leather. Evelyn walked toward the bench, the click-click-click of her heels sounding like a countdown. "Your Honor," Evelyn said, placing the binder gently on Judge Miller's desk. "I have filed an emergency appearance electronically 10 minutes ago. My team has also just emailed the clerk a forensic accounting report that dates back 7 years." Judge Miller opened the red binder. He adjusted his glasses. He flipped a page, then another. His eyebrows climbed higher with every turn. "Mr. Jensen," the judge said, not looking up. "According to your financial affidavit filed last week, you claimed your construction firm, Jensen Development, was operating at a loss for the last 3 quarters. Is that correct?" Rick stood up, smoothing his jacket. "Yes, Your Honor. The market is tough. Materials costs are up. I've barely taken a salary." "Barely taken a salary," the judge repeated dryly. He looked at Evelyn. "Ms. Croft, what am I looking at on page 14? Evelyn turned to the room, addressing the gallery more than the judge. "You are looking at a shell company called Blue Horizon Logistics, registered in Georgetown, Grand Cayman. Mr. Jensen claims he pays Blue Horizon for consulting fees. Roughly $200,000 a month." Bella gasped. She covered her mouth with her hands. "200,000? Rick told me we couldn't afford a tutor for Leo's math class." Rick spun on her. "Shut up, Bella. You don't understand business. Mr. Jensen." The judge slammed his gavel. "Sit down," Evelyn continued, her voice cool and lethal. "The interesting thing about Blue Horizon Logistics, Your Honor, is that it has no employees, no office, no phone number, just a P.O. box, and the sole signatory for the bank account attached to it." Evelyn paused for effect. She looked Rick dead in the eye. "It's not Mr. Jensen," Evelyn said. "It's his mistress." The air left the room. Rick froze. Sterling closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Mistress," Bella whispered, the word feeling foreign on her tongue. "A Miss Jessica Wells," Evelyn clarified, pulling a photo from the file and sliding it across the table toward Rick. 24 years old, former hostess at the Gilded Lily, currently living in a condo in the Gold Coast that, according to these records, was purchased with funds from Blue Horizon 3 months ago. Rick looked at the photo. It was a picture of him and Jessica on a boat, laughing, holding champagne flutes. "This is inadmissible," Sterling shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "This is an ambush. We have not had time to review these documents." "You had time to hide the money, Arthur," Evelyn snapped back. "You certainly had time to prepare." She turned to Bella. For the first time, Bella saw the rage beneath her mother's composed exterior. It was a protective, terrifying fire. "Bella," Evelyn said softly, "he didn't just cut you off. He has been siphoning marital assets, your money, your future, into an offshore account to fund a new life with a woman half his age. While you were coupon clipping and begging him for grocery money, he was buying diamond tennis bracelets." Bella looked at Rick, the man she had loved, the man she had feared. Suddenly he didn't look like a monster. He looked like a pathetic, greedy little thief. Is it true? Bella asked. Her voice wasn't shaking anymore. It was cold. Rick sneered. The mask fell completely. So what if it is? I earned that money, Bella. Me. I built the company. You did nothing. You sat at home. I raised your son, Bella screamed, standing up. I managed your life. I entertained your clients. I gave up my career so you could have yours. Order, Judge Miller bellowed. Mr. Jensen, silence. Ms. Croft, you have made your point. If these documents are authenticated, we are looking at severe sanctions for hiding assets. This changes the entire division of property. We're not done, Your Honor, Evelyn said, her eyes gleaming. The money is just the appetizer. Mr. Sterling here filed a motion for full custody, claiming my daughter is an unfit mother due to emotional instability. Evelyn walked back to her table and leaned against it, crossing her arms. I would like to address that immediately, she said. Because if there is anyone in this room who is unfit, it is not the woman who stayed up every night when her son had a fever. It is the man who was working late in the Cayman Islands. Sterling stood up slowly. He looked dangerous now. The money was gone. He knew he lost that battle. So he was going to do what he did best. He was going to scorch the earth. Your Honor, Sterling said quietly, financial infidelity is one thing, but the safety of a child is another. We have a witness who will testify to Mrs. Jensen's erratic behavior that puts the child at risk. Evelyn narrowed her eyes. Bring them out, Arthur. Let's see what you've bought. The heavy doors opened again. This time there was no dramatic entrance, just a nervous shuffling. A woman walked in. She was middle-aged, wearing a floral dress that was too cheerful for the occasion. She clutched her purse tightly. Bella's eyes widened. Mrs. Higgins? It was their neighbor, Linda Higgins. The woman Bella had had tea with. The woman Bella had cried to when Rick didn't come home. Mrs. Linda Higgins to the stand, Sterling announced. Linda took the oath, her voice trembling. She refused to look at Bella. Sterling approached the witness stand, his demeanor shifting from aggressive lawyer to gentle confidant. Mrs. Higgins, you live next door to the Jensens, correct? Yes, sir. For 4 years. And you have observed Bella Jensen with her son, Leo? Yes. Tell the court about the incident on November 14th, Sterling said. Linda took a deep breath. I was in my garden. I heard shouting, screaming. I looked over the fence. Bella was in the yard with Leo. She was shaking him, yelling at him. The boy was crying, terrified. She looked out of control, like she was going to hit him. Did you intervene? I called out, Linda said. She turned and looked at me, and her eyes, they were wild, glazed over, like she was on something, or drunk. Drunk, Sterling repeated, emphasizing the word. At 3:15 p.m. on a Tuesday? I've seen the bottles in her recycling bin, Linda added quickly. Lots of wine bottles, every week. Bella was shaking her head frantically. No, that's a lie. I was yelling because Leo was running toward the street. A car was coming. I grabbed him to save him. Objection, Sterling snapped. The defendant will have her turn. Mrs. Higgins, Sterling continued, do you believe Leo is safe with his mother? Linda looked down at her hands. I worry. She seems very unstable, very angry. Thank you. No further questions. Sterling walked back to his table, looking satisfied. He had planted the seed. The unstable housewife narrative. It was a classic for a reason. It worked. Judge Miller looked concerned. He turned to Evelyn. Cross-examination? Evelyn didn't stand up immediately. She sat there, staring at Linda Higgins. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. 20. It was uncomfortable. Linda began to fidget. Finally, Evelyn stood. She picked up her gold-tipped cane and walked slowly toward the witness stand. She didn't look angry. She looked disappointed. "Mrs. Higgins," Evelyn began, her voice soft. "You said you've lived next door for 4 years. You and Bella were friends?" I suppose so." "Neighbors? Friends enough that she trusted you?" "Maybe." "Friends enough that you knew her husband, Rick, was rarely home?" "I knew he worked a lot." Evelyn stopped pacing. She turned to her associate. "Thomas, pull up Exhibit C4 on the monitor, please." A large screen on the wall flickered to life. It displayed a bank statement, but not Rick's. "Mrs. Higgins," Evelyn said, pointing at the screen with her cane. "This is a bank statement for a savings account at Chase Bank in your name. Can you explain the deposit of $5,000 made 3 days ago?" Linda's face went pale. That's personal." "It is personal," Evelyn agreed. "It's a cash deposit. And can you explain why the deposit slip has a note on it?" Evelyn motioned for the next slide. It was a grainy photo of the deposit slip. In the memo line, written in messy handwriting, was a reference number. "That reference number," Evelyn said, her voice dropping an octave, "corresponds to a check written from the business account of Jensen Development on the same day, listed in their ledger as landscaping services." Evelyn leaned in close to the witness stand. "Mrs. Higgins, do you run a landscaping company?" "No," Linda whispered. "Did you mow Mr. Jensen's lawn for $5,000? "No." "So," Evelyn thundered, her voice suddenly filling the room like a crack of thunder. "Mr. Jensen paid you $5,000 3 days before this hearing, and today you sit here and testify that his wife is an alcoholic abuser. Is that correct?" He said it was a loan," Linda stammered, tears welling up. "He said he was helping me. My husband lost his job." "He bought you," Evelyn shouted. "He bought your loyalty, and he bought your lies, and you sold my daughter out for $5,000. "Objection!" Sterling yelled, standing up. "Badgering the witness." "I'm not badgering her. I'm exposing her," Evelyn retorted. She turned back to Linda. "And about the wine bottles in the recycling bin. Who took the recycling out every week, Mrs. Higgins?" "Rick did," Linda sobbed. "Rick always took the bins out." "So those bottles could have been his?" I guess." "And the incident in the yard? Did you see a car?" Linda looked at Rick, who was now burying his face in his hands. "Yes," Linda whispered. "There was a delivery truck. It was speeding. Bella grabbed Leo to pull him back from the curb." "She saved his life," Evelyn stated. "Yes." "Get out of my sight," Evelyn said, dismissing her with a wave of her hand. Judge Miller looked furious. He glared at Sterling. "Counselor, did you know your client paid the witness?" Sterling looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him. I was unaware of any transaction, Your Honor." "Mr. Jensen," the judge said, his voice ice-cold, "you are treading on very thin ice. Witness tampering is a felony." Rick stood up, his face red, veins bulging in his neck. He was cornered, and like any cornered animal, he lashed out. "It doesn't matter," Rick shouted, pointing a shaking finger at Bella. "She's still crazy. You want to know the truth? You want to know why she's really here? Ask her about the pills. Ask her about what happened 5 years ago in the hospital." Bella froze. Her blood ran cold. Evelyn stiffened. Rick was smiling now, a manic, desperate smile. "Go ahead, Evelyn. Defend that. Defend the fact that your daughter was committed for a 72-hour hold because she tried to end it all. You think a judge gives a kid to a woman who wanted to check out?" The room went silent. This wasn't a lie. This was the one secret Bella had buried deep. The one moment of weakness during the darkest year of her marriage, induced by Rick's gaslighting and isolation. Judge Miller looked at Bella. "Mrs. Jensen, is this true?" Bella couldn't breathe. The walls were closing in. Evelyn walked over to Bella. She didn't look at the judge. She looked at her daughter. She placed a hand on Bella's shoulder. "Bella," Evelyn whispered, "lift your head." Bella looked up, tears streaming down her face. "He thinks that is your shame," Evelyn said, loud enough for the room to hear. "He thinks your pain is a weapon. We are going to show him it is your armor." Evelyn turned to the judge. "My client was hospitalized 5 years ago, Your Honor," Evelyn said, her voice trembling with suppressed emotion. "But Mr. Jensen seems to have forgotten why." Evelyn reached into her briefcase and pulled out a small, black cassette tape. It looked ancient. "What is that?" Sterling asked, wary. "Insurance," Evelyn said. Bella didn't have a lawyer 5 years ago, but she had a mother who knows that monsters don't stop until they are stopped. "I recorded the phone call he made to her the night she was admitted, the call where he told her exactly what to do." Rick's eyes bulged. "You can't play that. That's illegal. Two-party consent." "Actually," Evelyn smiled, a shark-like grin returning, "in Illinois, there is an exception for recording conversations if there is a reasonable suspicion of a crime being committed. And what is on this tape, Your Honor, is domestic abuse." She held the tape up. "Shall I press play?" The courtroom was so quiet, you could hear the hum of the air conditioning unit 3 rooms away. All eyes were glued to the small black cassette player Evelyn Croft had placed on the evidence table. It looked like a relic from another era, a stark contrast to the sleek laptops and tablets surrounding it. Rick was standing, his hands gripping the back of his chair. He looked like a man watching a fuse burn down to a powder keg. "Your Honor," Sterling said, his voice straining to remain calm, "I must vehemently object. This is a private conversation. It is prejudicial. It is evidence of the mental state Mr. Jensen claims my client lacks," Evelyn interrupted, her voice cutting through the air. "You opened this door, Arthur. You claimed Bella was unstable. We are simply providing the context for why." Judge Miller looked at the tape, then at Rick. The judge's face was unreadable, but his eyes were hard. "Overruled," Judge Miller said softly. "Play the tape." Evelyn pressed the button. At first, there was only the hiss of static. Then, a voice cut through the noise. It was undeniable. It was Rick. But it wasn't the smooth, charming voice he used in business meetings. It was low, slurred with whiskey, and dripping with venom. Tape voice. "Rick, stop crying. God, you are pathetic. You know that? You're sitting there sobbing like a child." Tape voice. "Bella, faint, weeping. Rick, please. I just need you to stay home tonight. I'm scared. I feel like I'm disappearing." Tape voice. "Rick, maybe you should. Disappear, I mean." The air in the courtroom seemed to drop 10 degrees. Bella closed her eyes, tears leaking out, but she didn't cover her ears. She forced herself to listen. She forced herself to remember the woman she used to be, so she would never be her again. Tape voice. "Rick, look at you. No friends, no job. Your parents gave up on you. I'm the only one who puts up with you, and even I'm sick of it. If you swallowed that whole bottle on the nightstand, who would miss you? Honestly? Leo would be better off. He wouldn't have a crazy mother dragging him down." Tape voice. "Bella, don't say that." Tape voice. "Rick, do it, Bella. Do us both a favor. Just go to sleep. Nobody wants you here." Click. Evelyn pressed the stop button. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It wasn't just silence, it was judgment. Judge Miller slowly turned his head to look at Rick. The look was one of pure, unadulterated disgust. "You told her." The judge's voice shook slightly. "You told the mother of your child to kill herself?" Rick was trembling. He wiped sweat from his upper lip. It was a fight, Your Honor. We were both saying things. I was drunk. I didn't mean it. It was 5 years ago. It was psychological warfare, Evelyn stated, her voice devoid of emotion. You isolated her. You controlled the finances. You cut off her support system. And when she was at her lowest, you handed her the weapon and told her to pull the trigger. That is not unstable, Mr. Sterling. That is a survival story. Bella is here today because she was strong enough not to listen to him. Bella stood up. Her legs felt steady for the first time all day. She looked at Rick, really looked at him. He seemed smaller now. The expensive suit looked like a costume. I didn't do it because of Leo, Bella said, her voice clear. I put the bottle down because I heard him crying in the other room, and I realized that if I left, he would be left alone with you. Sterling sank into his chair. He knew the custody battle was over. No judge in the state would give a child to a man recorded, baiting his wife into suicide. Your Honor, Sterling said quietly, we would like to request a recess. Denied, Judge Miller snapped. We are finishing this today. I've heard enough about Mr. Jensen's character. I want to hear about the money. Miss Croft, you mentioned a mistress. I did, Evelyn said. She walked back to her table and exchanged a look with one of her associates. But I think it's better if we hear it from the source. Rick's head snapped up. What? Mr. Jensen thought he was clever, Evelyn addressed the court. He thought that by putting the Cayman accounts in Miss Jessica Wells's name, he was shielding himself. If the IRS came knocking, Jessica would take the fall. If Bella came looking, the money wouldn't be in his name. Evelyn smiled. It was a terrifying sight. But the problem with using people, Rick, is that eventually they realize they are being used. The double doors at the back of the courtroom opened again. Rick Jensen spun around in his chair so fast it screeched against the floor. Walking down the center aisle was a young woman. She was stunning, dressed in a sleek black dress that looked expensive, but somber. She had dark hair and sunglasses, which she removed as she passed the bar. It was Jessica Wells, the mistress. But she wasn't looking at Rick with love. She wasn't looking at him with fear. She was looking at him with cold, hard calculation. Rick stood up. Jessica, what are you doing here? Don't say a word. Sit down, Mr. Jensen, the bailiff barked, stepping forward. Jessica walked straight to the witness stand. She didn't wait to be called. She looked at the judge. I was subpoenaed, Your Honor, but I'm here voluntarily. Sterling looked like he was having a cardiac event. Your Honor, I object. We have no idea what this witness will say. This is trial by ambush. Mr. Sterling, Judge Miller said, leaning back, considering your client hid $7 million in this woman's name, I think she is highly relevant. Swear her in. Jessica took the oath. She sat down, crossing her legs. She looked at Bella for a brief moment. There was no animosity in her eyes. There was an apology. Evelyn approached the stand. Miss Wells, thank you for coming. I didn't have much choice once your investigators showed me the paperwork, Jessica said, her voice husky. Let's clarify that for the court, Evelyn said. Mr. Jensen told you he was hiding money from his crazy ex-wife, correct? He told you he was protecting his future with you? Yes, Jessica said. He said Bella was a gold digger. He said she would bleed him dry. He asked me to open the account in the Caymans. He said it was temporary. He promised we would use it to buy a house in Italy once the divorce was final. A romantic promise, Evelyn noted. And why did you decide to turn over the access codes to my firm this morning? Jessica reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Because, Jessica said, her eyes drilling into Rick. I found out I wasn't the only one. Rick's mouth fell open. I found this in his briefcase while he was in the shower, Jessica said, holding up the paper. It's a deed. A deed to what? Evelyn asked. A villa in Tuscany, Jessica said, purchased last month, using funds from the Blue Horizon account. Well, that sounds like the house he promised you, Evelyn said. That's what I thought, Jessica said bitterly, until I saw the name of the co-owner listed on the deed. She unfolded the paper and read the name aloud. Veronica Miller. A gasp went through the courtroom. Even the stenographer stopped typing. Who is Veronica Miller? Judge Miller asked, confused. She's his 22-year-old intern, Jessica spat out. He wasn't saving the money for me. He was using me to hide it so he could run off with her. Rick collapsed into his chair. He put his head in his hands. It was over. The house of cards hadn't just fallen, it had been incinerated. He played us all, Jessica said, looking at Bella. He told me you were the monster. But he's the only monster here. Evelyn turned to the judge. Your Honor, we have the signed affidavit from Miss Wells granting full access to the offshore accounts. We have the paper trail proving Mr. Jensen committed perjury, fraud, and money laundering, and we have the testimony proving he is a danger to his wife and child. Evelyn walked over to Bella's table. She didn't sit down. She stood tall, like a general surveying a conquered battlefield. We are asking for the maximum, Evelyn said. We want full legal and physical custody of Leo Jensen. We want 100% of the marital assets, including the hidden funds, as punitive damages for the fraud. We want the house, we want the cars, and we want Mr. Jensen to pay for every single billable hour my firm has worked today. She paused, looking at Sterling. And considering my hourly rate is $1,200, and I brought 3 associates, that is going to be a very, very expensive bill. Sterling didn't argue. He closed his briefcase. He looked at Rick, who was staring blankly at the wall, his life in ruins. I think, Sterling muttered to his client, loud enough for Bella to hear, you should have settled for the condo. Judge Miller cleared his throat. He looked at the wreckage of the plaintiff's case. I am ready to issue my ruling, the judge said. Judge Harrison Miller sat in silence for a long moment. He took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly with a handkerchief, a gesture that everyone in the legal profession knew meant he was composing a eulogy for the losing side. Rick Jensen was slumped in his chair. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. The arrogance, the perfect tan, the expensive suit, it all looked cheap now. He was just a liar caught in the glare of the lights. Stand up, Judge Miller said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. Rick struggled to his feet. Arthur Sterling stood up briskly, already distancing himself physically from his client. Mr. Jensen, the judge began, his eyes cold behind the lenses. In 20 years on the bench, I have seen greed, I have seen cruelty, and I have seen stupidity, but rarely have I seen them combined so efficiently in one person. Rick opened his mouth to speak, but the judge raised a finger. Silence. You have done enough talking. You threatened your wife's life. You attempted to defraud this court. You committed perjury. You engaged in witness tampering. And you tried to abandon your own child to run off with a 22-year-old. The judge looked down at his notes, scribbling furiously. This court finds in favor of the defendant, Bella Jensen, on all counts. Bella let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for 10 years. Evelyn reached out and gripped her hand tight. Regarding custody, the judge continued, full legal and physical custody of Leo Jensen is awarded to the mother, effective immediately. Mr. Jensen, your visitation rights are suspended, pending a full psychological evaluation and the completion of a batterer's intervention program. And frankly, given the tape we just heard, you will be lucky if you ever see that boy unsupervised again. Rick flinched as if he'd been slapped. But he's my son. You should have thought of that before you used him as a pawn, Miller snapped. Regarding the assets, the judge turned a page. I am invalidating the pre-nuptial agreement due to coercion and fraudulent non-disclosure. Since you tried to hide the money, Mr. Jensen, I am going to make sure you don't keep it. I am awarding Mrs. Jensen the marital home, the contents of the Blue Horizon accounts, and the Tuscany property. Furthermore, I am ordering a liquidation of your shares in Jensen Development to pay for Mrs. Jensen's legal fees and punitive damages for emotional distress, set at $2 million. Sterling closed his eyes. He knew what that meant. Rick was bankrupt. And finally, the judge said, looking toward the bailiff, Mr. Sterling, you claimed you were unaware of the witness tampering. I will let the Bar Association decide if they believe you. But as for your client, the judge nodded to the two uniformed officers standing by the door. Mr. Jensen admitted under oath to financial fraud. The deed provided by Miss Wells is evidence of money laundering. Officers, please take Mr. Jensen into custody until the district attorney can arrive to press formal charges. Rick's eyes went wide with panic. Custody? No! You can't arrest me. I'm Richard Jensen. I own this town. Not anymore, Evelyn Croft said from her table. Her voice was the final nail in the coffin. Now, you're just inmate number 409. The officers moved in. They grabbed Rick's arms, pulling them behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the room. Bella! Rick screamed as they dragged him toward the side door. Bella, tell them I'm a good father. Bella, please. Bella turned slowly. She looked at the man who had controlled every aspect of her life for a decade. She looked at the man who told her she was nothing. I can't help you, Rick, she said, her voice steady and calm. I have to go pick up my son. The doors slammed shut, cutting off Rick's desperate pleas. The courtroom was silent again. Court is adjourned, Judge Miller said. He looked at Bella and gave her a small, rare nod of respect. Good luck, Mrs. Jensen. The heavy oak doors of courtroom 4B clicked shut, sealing the chaos inside. The sound was final, like the closing of a coffin lid. For a moment, the silence in the hallway was so absolute it made Bella's ears ring. She stood there, staring at the grain of the wood. Her heart was still hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Thump, thump, thump. A physical echo of the adrenaline that had sustained her for the last hour. She realized her hands were shaking, not from fear, not anymore, but from the sheer, overwhelming shock of survival. It was the feeling of walking away from a car crash without a scratch. He's gone, she told herself. It's actually over. For 10 years, Richard Jensen had been the sky and the ground of her world. He had determined the weather of her life. If he was angry, it stormed. If he was pleased, she was allowed a brief glimpse of sun. She had forgotten what it felt like to simply stand in a room without gauging the temperature of someone else's mood. Breathe, Bella, a voice said beside her. Bella turned. Jessica Wells was standing near the water fountain, clutching her purse to her chest like a shield. The young mistress looked stripped of her glamour. Without the courtroom theatrics, she was just a 24-year-old girl who had gotten too close to a fire. Jessica adjusted her sunglasses, hiding red-rimmed eyes. She hesitated, then took a step toward Bella. "I know I'm the last person you want to speak to," Jessica said, her voice brittle. "And I know sorry doesn't fix the last year of your life. But I didn't know about the abuse. I didn't know about the tape." Bella looked at her. A month ago, she would have felt hatred. She would have seen Jessica as the enemy. But now, looking at the tremor in Jessica's hands, Bella only felt a strange, weary pity. "He told you I was crazy," Bella said softly. "He told you I was the problem. That he was the victim." Jessica nodded, biting her lip. "He made me feel like I was saving him. He has a way of making you feel like the center of the universe until you ask for something. Then you become a burden." "He would have done the same to you," Bella said, her voice steady. "The Tuscany house, the Veronica on the deed? That was your future, Jessica. You didn't just help me today. You saved yourself." Jessica looked down at the floor. "I hope you and your son. I hope you have a good life, Bella." "We will," Bella answered. Jessica walked away toward the elevators, the click of her heels fading into the distance. She was a ghost of Bella's past, exorcised and gone. Bella turned to the other woman standing in the hallway. Evelyn Croft was busy organizing the files in her leather briefcase, her movements precise and calm. But as the elevator doors dinged shut, she stopped. She looked up, and for the first time since she had burst into the courtroom, the formidable mask of the Dragon Lady slipped. Her shoulders softened. The steel in her eyes melted into something infinitely more painful. "Mum," Bella whispered. The word felt heavy, loaded with 5 years of silence. "Bella," Evelyn said. She didn't move to hug her yet. She looked like she was afraid she might break if she did. "You were magnificent in there." "I was terrified," Bella admitted. I thought you weren't coming. I thought you didn't care." Evelyn flinched. She reached into the front pocket of her briefcase and pulled out a thick bundle of letters. They were bound with a rubber band, the paper worn from being handled over and over. "I wrote to you every single week," Evelyn said, her voice trembling. "For 5 years. Birthdays, holidays, Tuesdays. I sent them all." She handed the bundle to Bella. Bella looked at the top envelope. It was stamped in red ink. "Return to sender. Refused." "He sent them back," Bella realized, horrified. "He told me you said I was a disappointment. He told me you said I made my bed and I had to lie in it." "He lied," Evelyn said fiercely. "He cut the phone lines. He blocked my number. I hired a private investigator 2 years ago, just to get a picture of you, to make sure you were alive. I tried to visit, and his security turned me away at the gate. They said you threatened to call the police if I didn't leave." Tears blurred Bella's vision. She traced her mother's handwriting on the envelope. The isolation hadn't been an accident. It had been a fortress Rick built, brick by brick. "I wanted to burn the gate down," Evelyn continued, stepping closer. "But I knew Rick. If I acted crazy, if I forced my way in, he would use it. He would tell the judge your family was unstable. He would use my anger to take Leo away from you. So I had to do the hardest thing I've ever done." Evelyn reached out and cupped Bella's face. Her hands were warm. "I had to wait," Evelyn whispered. "I had to wait for you to find a crack in the wall. When I saw the divorce filing, I knew he had finally made a mistake. He got arrogant. He thought you were broken. He forgot who raised you." Bella let out a sob, a raw, guttural sound, and collapsed into her mother's arms. Evelyn held her tight, smelling of lavender and iron will, rocking her back and forth right there in the courthouse hallway. "It's over," Evelyn murmured into her hair. "The house, the money, the fear. It's all over. You are a croft, Bella. We don't break. We just wait for our turn to strike. They stood there for a long minute, 2 generations of women reunited by the wreckage of a man's ego. Finally, Bella pulled back, wiping her face. "Leo," she said. "I need to get Leo." "The car is waiting downstairs," Evelyn smiled, regaining her composure. "And I believe I promised my grandson a very large ice cream sundae." 30 minutes later, the black town car pulled up to the curb of Lincoln Elementary. The afternoon sun was golden, bathing the brick school building in a warm, forgiving light. The bell rang, a shrill, happy sound that signaled freedom. Doors burst open, and a flood of children in bright coats poured out. Bella stood by the car door, her heart in her throat. She scanned the sea of faces. And then she saw him. Leo was walking slowly, his backpack looking too big for his small shoulders. He looked down at his feet, the way he always did lately. The posture of a child who had learned to make himself small to avoid notice. "Leo!" Bella called out. The boy's head snapped up. He saw her. Then he saw the smile on her face. A real smile, one that reached her eyes, one he hadn't seen in years. "Mom!" he yelled. He broke into a run. He didn't just run. He sprinted, dropping his backpack on the sidewalk. Bella dropped to her knees on the concrete, opening her arms wide. Leo collided with her, burying his face in her neck. "Dad said you were going away," he sobbed. "He said you weren't coming to get me." Bella held him tighter than she had ever held anything in her life. She looked over Leo's shoulder at Evelyn, who was watching them with a fierce, protective pride. "Dad was wrong," Bella whispered into her son's ear. "I'm never going away, and we are never, ever going back to that house again." Leo pulled back, wiping his nose. "Where are we going?" Bella stood up, holding her son's hand. She looked at the blue sky, vast and open. She thought about the villa in Tuscany. She thought about the millions in the bank. But mostly, she thought about the silence in her head, where Rick's voice used to be. "We're going to get ice cream," Bella said. "And then? We're going to go wherever we want." They say the wheels of justice turn slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. Rick Jensen spent 10 years building a kingdom on the back of his wife's suffering, convinced that his money could buy him silence. He thought Bella was helpless because she had no lawyer. He didn't realize that some bonds are deeper than any legal contract. He didn't just fight a wife, he fought a mother protecting her child and a grandmother protecting her legacy. In the end, Rick lost everything, not because he was unlucky, but because he underestimated the quiet strength of the woman he tried to break. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder that the truth always comes out. And if you want more stories about karma hitting hard, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. What would you have done in Bella's shoes? Let me know in the comments below.